In a quiet Texas neighborhood where family barbecues and friendly waves painted the picture of safety, police were called to a home that would shatter that illusion forever. Inside, a newlywed bride, just weeks into her marriage, was discovered in a way so horrifying that even hardened investigators were left speechless. Her life had been stolen, her future erased, and the brutality of the act raised one question that echoed through the town. Who could carry out something so merciless, and why? What began as a night like any other would soon become a crime scene that stunned an entire community and revealed a truth no one could have imagined. The call came in late at night. Officers were dispatched to a modest Texas home, one that from the outside looked no different from the others on the block. Neighbors described it as the kind of place where nothing extraordinary ever happened, until that night. Inside, they found the body of a young woman, a newlywed, whose life should have been filled with hope, plans, and the excitement of building a future with her husband. Instead, the scene was marked by violence so extreme it was almost impossible to comprehend. The victim had been brutally killed, her body left in a condition that investigators would struggle to forget. She was only weeks into her marriage, her wedding photos still fresh, her vows still echoing in the memories of family and friends. But now, those same loved ones were facing questions no one ever wants to ask. How could a life filled with so much promise end so suddenly? Who could want her dead? And what could drive someone to carry out such an unthinkable act? For detectives, the case was clear in one sense. This was no accident. This was deliberate, intimate, and savage. Yet, the path to uncovering the truth would take them through twists that few could have predicted, as every layer of her new marriage, her home, and the people closest to her came under scrutiny. To understand the magnitude of this crime, investigators had to first understand who the victim was. She was young, vibrant, and deeply loved by her family. Friends described her as someone who brought light into every room, the kind of person who always had a plan for the future. She worked hard, she had ambitions, and she was known for her kindness. In the days before her death, she was just beginning a new chapter, married life, a fresh start, and what seemed to be the fulfillment of everything she had dreamed of. Her wedding had taken place only weeks earlier. Photographs captured the joy in her smile, the glow of a bride standing beside the man she had chosen to spend her life with. The ceremony, though modest, was filled with laughter, promises, and the kind of optimism that comes with young love. To the outside world, it seemed like a perfect beginning. Family members recalled how happy she looked that day, how certain she seemed about the man she had married. For those who knew her best, there was no warning, no indication that tragedy was lurking just around the corner. But as investigators soon discovered, appearances can be deceiving. Behind the carefully arranged flowers, the posed photographs, and the exchanged vows, questions began to emerge. How well did she truly know the man she had married? Were there cracks in the marriage that friends and family either missed or simply chose not to see? Neighbors later told police about arguments they thought they overheard. Some described unusual behavior from the husband, moments of anger, sudden changes in mood, and a possessiveness that raised quiet concern. Others insisted they had seen nothing alarming at all, that the couple seemed, at least on the surface, happy and normal. These contradictions paint an unsettling picture. If there were warning signs, they had gone unnoticed or perhaps ignored. The victim's family, meanwhile, struggled to piece together what had gone wrong. They spoke of a daughter and sister who had her entire life ahead of her, plans for a family, hopes for a career, dreams of traveling with her husband. All of that had been stripped away in an instant, leaving only questions that no one yet had the answers to. As detectives began to dig into her personal life, they turned their focus to the very thing that had seemed to promise her a lifetime of happiness: her marriage, a marriage that was only weeks old. And what they would uncover about that relationship would change the direction of the investigation entirely. If you have listened to this time, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel as a way to support this type of daily crime tales. On the night of the murder, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, at least not from the outside looking in. The street was quiet. Porch lights flickered on as families settled in for the evening. But inside one home, events were unfolding that would forever scar the neighborhood's sense of safety. The first call to authorities was brief, panicked, and unsettling. A desperate voice on the other end of the line pleaded for help, claiming something was terribly wrong. Within minutes, police were dispatched. Officers expected, perhaps, a domestic dispute, maybe an accident. What they walked into was far beyond anything they had imagined. When detectives entered the home, the air was heavy and still. Signs of chaos were immediately visible. Objects overturned, streaks that suggested a struggle had taken place. But it was what they discovered deeper inside the house that froze even the most experienced officers in their tracks. The young bride lay lifeless, her body showing clear evidence of a violent attack. She had been brutally decapitated, her remains left in a manner that could only be described as deliberate, calculated, and deeply disturbing. The brutality of the crime was unlike anything many of the officers had ever encountered. Hardened professionals who had seen shootings, stabbings, and countless tragedies admitted later that this scene was one they would never forget. Investigators carefully documented every detail, from the overturned furniture to the blood patterns on the walls, trying to reconstruct the sequence of events that had led to such an unspeakable outcome. In the hours that followed, the neighborhood was transformed into a crime scene. Yellow tape surrounded the property. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering in disbelief, some in tears, others too stunned to speak. For them, this was not just another crime on the evening news. This was happening on their street, to people they thought they knew. As forensic teams worked methodically, one question grew louder. Who could have done this? And more importantly, where was the husband? His absence at the time of discovery immediately drew suspicion. Had he been the one to call for help, or was someone else the first to alert authorities? The timeline was murky, and every hour that passed without answers deepened the mystery. Detectives quickly realized this was no random break-in. There was no sign of forced entry, no stolen valuables, no indication that an intruder had slipped into the home. Instead, the evidence suggested something more intimate, something personal. Whoever had committed this crime hadn't just ended a life. They had sent a message, one written in violence too brutal to ignore. But for investigators, the question remained: was this the act of a stranger consumed by rage, or had the danger been inside her home all along? As the search for answers intensified, suspicion began to fall on the one person who was supposed to protect her, cherish her, and build a future with her: the husband. As the days turned into weeks, investigators refused to let go of the unanswered questions that surrounded the murder of the young bride. Every inch of the home was examined, every scrap of evidence tested, and soon patterns began to emerge. Patterns that pointed to a carefully constructed lie, unraveling piece by piece. Forensic teams studied the blood patterns on the walls and floors. What they revealed was chilling. This was not a sudden attack carried out by a stranger in a fit of impulse. It was controlled, deliberate, and consistent with someone who had time inside the home, not someone breaking in from the outside. Detectives also began to comb through the couple's digital lives. The victim's phone showed messages to friends about her growing concerns. In the weeks after the wedding, she confided that things were not what they seemed. Arguments had escalated, tempers had flared, and she had begun to wonder if she had made a mistake. Those texts, once dismissed as ordinary marital struggles, now carried the weight of haunting foreshadowing. The husband's phone, meanwhile, told its own story. Internet searches raised alarm. Phrases about controlling a spouse, legal consequences of murder, and even disturbingly specific queries about how long it takes police to track certain evidence. To investigators, this wasn't just suspicious, it was potentially damning. Detectives also pieced together his movements on the night of the murder. GPS data, surveillance cameras, and phone records suggested a timeline that clashed with his statements. Places he claimed not to have been, his phone keyed him there. Time he claimed to be elsewhere, footage captured his car in the vicinity of the home. Each discovery tightened the noose around his alibi. But beyond the science and the digital trails, there was the question of motive. Why? What could drive a husband, newly married, to destroy the very person he had promised to cherish? As investigators pulled at the threads of his life, answers began to surface. Financial pressures weighed heavily on the couple. Debt collectors, unpaid bills, and arguments about money created a storm behind closed doors. There were also whispers of infidelity, accusations that both husband and wife may have leveled at one another. And then there was his temper, described by some as quick, unpredictable, and capable of turning violent without warning. For the investigators, the pieces were aligning: opportunity, motive, and behavior that pointed in only one direction. Yet they also knew this case would not be easy to prove. Without a confession, without a witness, they would need to build their case brick by brick, leaving no room for doubt. And just when they thought they understood the scope of what had happened, new revelations emerged. Revelations that would shock even the most seasoned detectives and leave the community questioning everything they thought they knew about the couple's short-lived marriage. With mounting evidence pointing to the husband, detectives made their move. He was arrested and charged, the news sending shockwaves through the small Texas community. For neighbors, it was almost too much to process. The man they had once seen mowing his lawn, waving as he drove past, was now accused of one of the most brutal crimes the town had ever witnessed. As the trial began, the courtroom was filled with tension. On one side, the family of the victim, their grief visible in every glance, every tear, every whispered prayer. On the other, the husband, seated beside his defense attorneys, staring straight ahead, expressionless. The prosecution laid out its case in stark detail. They presented the forensic evidence, the blood patterns, the lack of forced entry, the digital footprints that placed him in the home at the critical time. They brought forward the internet searches, each one darker than the last, painting a picture of a man not caught off guard by tragedy, but one who had studied, planned, and acted with chilling precision. But it was the testimonies that left the greatest impact. Friends of the victim took the stand, recalling late-night phone calls, texts filled with fear, and quiet pleas for help that now seemed devastatingly prophetic. Family members spoke through tears about a daughter, a sister, a niece, who had confided that her marriage was not what the fairy tale it appeared to be. And then there were the neighbors, some recalling the sound of arguments through the walls, others describing a man whose temper seemed to ignite without warning. The defense, however, worked tirelessly to cast doubt. They argued there was no direct witness, no camera capturing the act itself. They painted the husband as a man overwhelmed by debt, by stress, by the sudden weight of responsibility, but not a killer. They suggested alternative possibilities, even raising the question of whether someone else, perhaps an unknown intruder, could have committed the crime. As the days stretched on, the trial became more than a legal proceeding. It became a public reckoning. The media descended, headlines capturing every twist and turn. And then came the most shocking revelation. A witness claimed the husband had privately admitted in the weeks before the murder that he felt trapped, that he regretted the marriage, and that he sometimes fantasized about what his life might be like without her. This admission, coupled with the evidence, was devastating to the defense. The jury listened, some visibly shaken, as the prosecution closed their case with a stark message. This was not the work of a faceless intruder, not the act of chance, but the deliberate killing of a woman by the man she trusted most. Yet, even as the courtroom sat in silence, awaiting the verdict, one question remained heavy in the air. Would the jury believe the evidence was enough to condemn him? Or would doubt, however small, be enough to let him walk free? When the jury finally returned with their decision, the courtroom fell into absolute silence. Every eye was fixed on the foreperson, every breath held in suspense. And then the words were spoken. Guilty. The husband was convicted of murdering his bride, an act so brutal, so deliberate, that the jury found no room for mercy. His sentence would ensure that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. For the victim's family, the verdict was bittersweet. Justice had been served, but justice could not bring back the daughter they had lost, the young woman who should have been building her future instead of being laid to rest. Her mother wept openly in court, later telling reporters that no sentence could ever heal the wounds left behind. Her father described the emptiness at family gatherings, the silence where her laughter should have been. The community, too, was forever changed. In the weeks after the trial, neighbors struggled with the memory of living so close to such horror. The house where the crime took place became a symbol of unanswered questions and shattered illusions. Some avoided walking past it, unable to separate the walls from the violence they concealed. Others left flowers at the curb, small tributes to the young life stolen inside. Friends and coworkers spoke about the victim at vigils and memorials. They remembered her kindness, her ambitions, her dreams that would never be realized. They spoke of her joy at her wedding, the radiant smile frozen forever in photographs, now serving as both a reminder of her happiest day and the cruel irony of what followed so soon after. The case reverberated far beyond the neighborhood. It sparked conversations about domestic violence, about the red flags so often missed in relationships, and about how quickly a facade of happiness can collapse into tragedy. For many, it was not just the brutality of the act, but the speed with which life had shifted, from vows and celebration to violence and loss in a matter of weeks. Even in the face of a guilty verdict, the sense of disbelief lingered. People asked themselves how a man could so easily betray the woman he had promised to love and protect. And for those who knew her best, the answer never came. All they were left with was grief, memories, and the reminder that sometimes the darkest tragedies happen in the places we least expect. The murder of a young bride, only weeks after she said her vows, left behind more than grief. It raised questions that still echo today. How could something so violent erupt in such a short time? Were there signs that everyone missed, or was this a tragedy no one could have predicted? Experts who studied the case pointed to troubling patterns. Many marriages that end in violence, they noted, often carry hidden tensions, financial struggles, jealousy, a history of control or abuse that doesn't always show itself publicly. In this case, the evidence suggested that those tensions had been present from the beginning, concealed beneath smiles and carefully posed photographs. Advocates for domestic violence awareness used the tragedy as a painful reminder. Early warning signs should never be ignored. Controlling behavior, isolation, sudden changes in temperament. These are not just quirks of personality, but often red flags of something far more dangerous. The victim had confided in friends that her marriage was not what she had hoped for. But like so many others, she may not have realized how quickly words and arguments could escalate to deadly action. The brutality of this crime also invited comparisons to other high-profile cases, stories where the person closest to the victim became their greatest danger. Again and again, these tragedies remind us that violence is not always the work of strangers lurking in the shadows. Sometimes it comes from within the home, from the very person who vowed to protect. For the community and for all who followed the trial, the case became more than just headlines. It became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly a life can be stolen, how even the beginnings of what should be lifelong happiness can be shattered in an instant. And though the justice system delivered its verdict, the deeper questions about love, betrayal, and violence remain as haunting as ever. Her wedding day was meant to mark the start of a new life. Instead, it became the final chapter of her story. A bride full of dreams and surrounded by love, silenced in a way so violent that it shook an entire community to its core. Investigators pieced together the truth, the courts delivered their verdict, but no outcome could ever erase the loss. This case serves as a chilling reminder that appearances can deceive and that danger does not always come from outside the home. Sometimes it is hidden in plain sight, behind smiles, behind vows, behind promises that were never meant to be kept. Her story continues to echo long after the trial ended, leaving behind a haunting question. How many others suffer in silence, unnoticed, until it is too late? If you found this documentary compelling, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe justice was truly served, or are there still unanswered questions lingering in this case? And if you want to see more true crime documentaries like this one, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Because every story matters, every voice deserves to be heard, and sometimes revisiting these tragedies is the only way to make sure they are never forgotten.